All right, so I want to go ahead and get us started here. I'm sure some more people will trickle in, but we're going to try to leave relatively on time. Um, you might have asked yourself, why did we choose such an unusual hour of the day to do this meeting? And that's because we have Jeremy Talifero with us from Uganda. And so we love having the live element, but that certainly put it on a Saturday morning. So I know we've lost several people to sports and whatnot that have now been getting uncanceled. So that's both exciting and a little bit sad for us right now. I'm going to go ahead and post the handout, the link to the handout here. This has information on our speakers. It has Bible study notes. You should have received this in the previous emails. We have some coloring pages for kids and that kind of thing, and some Afghan recipes to try if you're interested in trying that. I remember my first time having Afghan food. I had no idea what to expect. Now, mind you, the only things I had seen about Afghanistan were coming across the news at that time, and our military was in there, so it's just pictures of fighting. And I thought, I know what Indian food is, I know what Chinese food is, I know what all these other foods are, but I've just never had a context. It was some of the best food I've had, and to date, it's one of my favorite food regions. Yeah, so in this call, I know we've got a lot of people in here, but please keep your microphone on mute. Towards the end, we will go into breakout rooms, and we'll have some prayer time. Feel free to unmute and pray with your group. I will post the prayer points into the chat, so you'll be able to see them as well, but they're also there in your handout if you have your handout with you. Also, please don't hit your screen share button. I have to enable that so our speakers can share their screens. But don't do that. I will deplane you if that happens. Also, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat bubble. We will have time for Q&A at the end. And so if you've typed them in, that will just give us some advance on. So whoever the speaker is, just type the speaker's name and put a question there, and we'll try to get to that at the end. And then in the packet, if you click that link or if you've printed the packet, on the last page there's a grid, and that grid is going to be used right here. This is going to be used for one of the exercises that our Houston Welcomes Refugee folks are going to do for us. I also wanted to talk about one of the coloring pages. I realize we don't have any kids on the call this morning, but if you have kids in your family or kids around, I'm sure this is something HWR would appreciate. This page is something that they use. Correct me if I'm giving bad information, Cindy, but children who color this in, this gets shared with a refugee family that's moving into Houston?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. So if you want to have your kids or grandkid, or if you want to color it in yourself, adult coloring is a thing now. And so if you want to color it in yourself, just paint us a pretty picture and get it into me, and I'll share it with our HWR friends. So our first thing that we do on a mission trip is we want to have a biblical perspective. And so if you ever come on a Wilcrest trip, early on in the trip, people really get angsty about how much training I put them through until they get thrown in the deep end, and then they realize this was for a reason, and they're really grateful that they went through it. And I have a thick enough skin, I can weather the discomfort of people's opinions. And so we always like to start with, what does the Bible say about what we're doing? What is the right heart that we should have? And so I want to share a short kind of devotional with you this morning. And this is coming out of Psalm 107, 1-8. I'm aware that this is a fairly dicey time in our country for any number of reasons. COVID, there's a lot of racial tension happening now. There's protests and counter-protests. There's riots. But election years in general, people tend to really try to speak to their base and to use inflammatory language to hit their base. And immigration always becomes a hot topic. And this isn't I know a lot of times this gets portrayed as being a Republican or conservative issue, but this is a right and left issue. Both presidents on both sides in the last 3 or 4 administrations have had lots of things to say and have done lots of things. There's actually a Netflix documentary right now called Immigration Nation. And if you get past the first episode, they actually start talking about some of the other administrations. But it's quite fascinating to see how different presidents have handled this. But I know for myself, working cross-culturally here in Houston, election season is always a time I try to keep my head down because we get shot at a lot because I've done a lot of work with Muslims and with refugees. And so it can be, this is Texas, it can get dicey fast. But God's heart is different from our heart. So Psalm 107, 1-8 says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he has redeemed from trouble and gathered in from the lands, from the east, from the west, from the north, from the south. Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way to dwell in a city. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. They cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them in their distress. He led them by a straight way till they reached a city to dwell in. Let them thank the Lord for his steadfast love, for his wondrous works to the children of man." So the first, I have some fill in the blank things there in the handout. The first thing it says, God has blank for refugees. I didn't want to give it away in my main point. So my central idea was God has keen love and purpose for those who are refugees. I didn't want to give that away, but the biblical word for that is steadfast love. And this is such a central concept to the entire Old Testament, is God's steadfast love. And so he's chosen a people. He's called them out from Abraham through the Old Testament to demonstrate his steadfast love. In fact, if we were to walk through the Psalms, certain Psalms like Psalm 115 and 87, and probably just about every other Psalm is mentioning God's steadfast love, to the degree that I remember writing a note in the margin of my Bible saying, mission in the Old Testament is the public declaration of God's steadfast love to his people. And so this is something that God wants to show to the refugees. And so the next blank is God has a purpose for his steadfast love, and that purpose is that he redeems. And so we see this, verse 1, let give thanks to the Lord, he's good, his steadfast love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, he has redeemed them from trouble. And so God is looking for people who are in trouble to redeem them. But this redemption isn't, in our minds, when we hear redeeming, we're thinking future salvation, not here and now life transformation or situation transformation. And so in redeeming the refugees, this is point number 3, God shows his sovereignty, and he names these directions over the east, the west, the north, the south. We say Jesus is Lord, and we use this term as a term of endearment, sort of like Jesus is, God is my grandpa, or he's pappy, or it's almost like we use it like an Abba Father kind of statement. But when we say Lord, he is the dominant one. He has rule, he has control. And so here in this psalm, he's mentioning the places that he's gathered them. And so the whole Old Testament is this story of dispersion and gathering, dispersion and gathering. So you have Adam and Eve who are dispersed. Tower of Babel, this was a wrongful gathering because they're supposed to be being dispersed and going out and filling the world. We see his people gathering in the land of Israel, then being dispersed. We see the church gathering. We see in mission the church being scattered. And so there's this constant gathering and scattering. But the places that he gathers from them from the lands, verse 3, is the east, the west, the north, and the south. And so this is showing God's total lordship over the whole world. And we see this in Psalm 2, that he makes the earth his footstool. And now we see the kind of people that God has concern for. God cares for the wanderer, the hungry, the weak, the troubled. All of this is coming out of verse 5. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted with them. They cried to the Lord in their trouble. He delivered them from their distress. I think for us in our world, there's so much media that we are being inundated with that shows problems throughout the whole world, that it's very easy to get fatigued and to kind of put everything on mute. I know I did this during COVID, right? During COVID, early in COVID, I'm following all the numbers, tracking everything, trying to see where it's going. At a certain point, I'm like, I haven't checked the news on COVID, and I think the last time I saw was President Trump has COVID now. But it had been maybe a month, and I just stopped watching it. I couldn't I couldn't deal with it. But God is actually looking for those people. And the final thought is he brings the refugee to a city. And this comes by verse 7. He led them by a straight way till they reached a city to dwell in. And so this is part of our urban missions class that we did from last year, but there's a purpose for cities. And I see a city like ours, or if you see a refugee camp to a degree, that's a bit of a makeshift city that's probably being stretched at the seams. But all through Scripture, from the beginning to the end, we see that God has a heart for the foreigner, for the people who are vulnerable. Leviticus 19:34, he tells his people, you shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you. You shall love him as yourself, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And so he's reminding them of their own narrative of being wanderers, which I think for many of us, we have forgotten. I know with my last name, you say it Hébert, even though it looks like Hébert. That's because it's French, right? So for us, it's really hard to forget. My grandmother was the last one speaking a different language, and this was educated out in the government schools here. So it's a little bit harder for us to forget. It's a closer memory for us, but I think it's easy to just forget, oh yeah, we just live here, we belong here. But God is reminding his people, hey, you were wandering in the desert, and I picked you up and carried you over here, and so that's what I want you to do. Deuteronomy 27:19, cursed be anyone who perverts the justice due to the sojourner, the fatherless, and the widow. And so God is putting certain people in a category where they are vulnerable and susceptible to exploitation. And this is an actual curse against them. But we see God's purpose isn't, people get in this debate on, is it social care or is it gospel care? And I don't see the Bible making that distinction. So a lot of those statements were about, their hunger, their place to stay, all of those kinds of things. But Acts 17:26-27 says he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and boundaries and their dwelling place, that they should seek God and feel their way towards him and find him. And so when I look at internationals in Houston, when I look at what God is doing through the global diaspora, we'll call it, so not every person who leaves their country is a refugee, though that is a certain particular group, but God is mixing the nations right now, and we can lean into that with fear and go, oh my gosh, they're coming here, what are we going to do? Or we can look with God's purpose and go, well, what is God's purpose in allowing the world to be changing like it is right now? And Acts 17 would say it's so that they can feel their way like they're in the dark, groping for the light switch, and so that they'll find him. And so this is God's heart for the wanderers. He has a special place for them. He has a special concern for them. And it's a way for him to show his steadfast love. In most, not biblical like they're right, but biblical time period pagan religions, people want to show favor and preference to those who can help them. And this makes me look good. If I have someone of note to my house, this makes me look good because I'm able to have an honorable person to my house. No one wants to have a refugee over. No one wants to have a stranger over, a poor person over. And yet here in this psalm, we see that God's heart is looking for the people who don't bring him honor, per se. It's not about that person's honor. It's about God's honor. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to move right along to Jeremy. And so, Jeremy, why don't you share with us?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you guys today. Some of you may have met me before, and some of you may haven't, but Willcrest is one of my absolute favorite churches in the whole planet. I actually speak about you guys a lot. I've written about you in some of my books, and I just feel like that you guys have a really special place in my heart. Part of that is because of the multicultural nature of the church, but I must admit another part has to do with good old Jonathan Williams, who was one of my missionaries whenever we were on the field in Peru. And, he's like, we're very close with Jonathan, and we love him a lot, and are just really proud of the way that he leads Willcrest and the vision that he sets forth for you guys. And so it's always a pleasure to be with you guys and to hang out and to talk. And unfortunately today it's over thousands of miles, but maybe sometime in the next couple of years, I'll be able to be with you in the flesh again sometime. But I'm going to I think the last time I spoke at Willcrest, I wasn't doing refugee work. So some of you may be confused. When did Jay start doing refugee work? Well, I'll kind of give you a little bit of the narrative and get you up to speed, tell you some stories about what God's doing and kind of where we're at right now. So I was leading our region for the IMB for a few years. And during that time was whenever the war was going on in South Sudan. You know, there had been a lot of fighting in the Sudan, in the northern part, but the war had kind of started to break out in 2013 in South Sudan. People were starting to trickle over the border, and so we began to kind of develop a strategy in our heads for how will we be able to address these issues. But at that point, I was doing it from a distance. I wasn't personally involved with it. I was trying to build a strategy for a future team to address that issue. And so, but between 2013 and 2016, things got increasingly worse, and we were less and less able to travel within the country of South Sudan. And so basically we had missionaries in 2 locations, but they couldn't travel anywhere outside of maybe a 10-mile radius of their homes because of landmines and fighting and ambushes and those types of things. And so it became really restrictive. Now, at the time, there were about 52 unreached people groups in the country of South Sudan, but we couldn't get access to almost any of them because of the conditions in the country. And so as a leader, who my job was the strategy, developing strategy for how we reach these tribes, was really frustrating because there was not a lot that we could do. And, you know, we prayed through that a lot and just tried to find, you know, seek out ideas and those types of things. Whenever I was back in the States in 2016 for our furlough, things got really bad in South Sudan. And we had to start pulling our people out. And it was during 2016 that when things were getting so bad that the refugees began to flood over. About between 3,000 and 4,000 every day were crossing the border into Uganda. And so overnight, these pretty good sized cities of refugees, you know, basically popped up here on the border. And basically what happened, the long story short, is I was asked to kind of head up that task because it's really out of the box task. Like, it's not the type of thing that the IMB does on the day-to-day basis. And if you guys know me, you know I'm kind of I've never been in the box. I've never met a box. And so I kind of hang out outside the box. And so it was really a good match for me. But having been a church planter for almost 2 decades, it was a huge shift because this involved humanitarian aid and a lot of things. We had to develop an NGO and a platform and all those things that I'd never done before. And so, you know, we had to walk through that process and figure out some new things. And the Lord was really gracious and opened our eyes to a lot of opportunities around us. And we began to meet some refugees. Thankfully, some of the missionaries that we had trained in South Sudan ended up being refugees just about an hour from our house. And so we started gathering with them. We planted a church nearby where they were staying and began to meet with some of those folks. Well, those people weren't from South Sudan. Those ones were from Sudan, primarily from the Darfur region and the Nuba Mountains region, which, if you know anything about Sudan, those are both very, very strong Muslim areas, but also areas that have been persecuted for decades. And so we came across quite a few people from there that we started to spend time with, and there were a handful that were believers. There were others that became believers. And I'm going to tell you a story about a guy named Salah. He is my dear friend, and I met him through one of the missionaries that we trained. But I want to tell you his story so that you can kind of see. I think Brian's right. You know, these things are really politicized. But all of the refugees that I know, they don't have any desire to go to America. They want to go back home. Like, that's their desire. And I think the politicization of everything just gives the wrong impression. And so I wanted to share about Salah. Salah, whenever I met him, he was a Muslim, and he was the halal butcher in that area of the camp. And so the Muslims would only buy meat from him because he was the only one who was allowed to butcher meat for Muslims. And so he was very highly esteemed in that area. And one of the things that he told me whenever he shared his testimony with me was that he noticed that whenever the humanitarian aid things were happening in the camp, that the Muslim organizations would come in and they would help Muslims. They would give food to Muslims, they would give clothes to Muslims, they would give benefits to Muslims, but they wouldn't help Christians. And he said, and I noticed whenever the Christians came, they helped everybody. They didn't care what country you were from, what color you were. They didn't care what religion you were. They helped everybody. And he said, that was the first seed of doubt that entered my heart, because I knew in my heart, something's not right about that. Like, why would they just help people like them? That doesn't seem right. And so he started spending more time with Christians in the camp, because, you know, they're in Uganda and the same restrictions that they had in Sudan were not there, because they couldn't be shunned because they were speaking to Christians. So he began to build some friendships with some Christians, and he wanted to learn more, but he didn't want to expose himself to the community that he was interested in Christianity. And so he did something really interesting. There have been a lot of little Bible schools and seminaries that have actually popped up in the refugee camps here in Uganda, which is really fascinating. But he thought the best place for me to learn about Christianity is at a seminary. And there was a Baptist church, in fact, one that we planted, that was kind of like a center where people were coming together and filling out applications so that they could go to this seminary. And he had one of his Christian friends smuggle him out. Now, you were supposed to go in, fill it out, and give it to the pastor. He had one of his friends smuggle out an application. He filled it out at home, and then he had his friend smuggle it back into the stack. And he was a Muslim. He was not a Christian at all, but he got help filling it out, and he got accepted to go to the seminary, which was about an hour and a half drive from his home here in Rhino Camp. He went up to Bidi Bidi Camp. And while he was there, he heard very clearly the gospel over about a 6-week period while he was living there, and he became a Christian. And so he came back and began, instead of being the halal butcher, he just began preaching in the streets and proclaiming the gospel. And they were like, wait a minute, like, you're a Muslim. And he was like, I was a Muslim, but I'm not a Muslim anymore. And let me share with you why. And Salah, because he was so well respected, people were listening to him. He became one of the elders fairly quickly within the church that we planted, and a very dear friend of mine. Now, I'm going to come back to Salah here in a few minutes, but I want to share with you kind of what God has done with this crisis in South Sudan. As I shared with you in 2016, whenever the war started breaking out, previous to that, we weren't able to get to these people groups. But whenever the war broke out and everybody started flooding into the country, every one of those people groups crossed the border, every one of them. And so of the 52 people groups, every single one of them are represented within 2-hour drive of my house right now, every single one of them. And many of them are in places of need where we can help by building them a house, or by drilling a water well nearby them, or by providing clothes for some of their children, or trauma healing classes for those who've undergone severe trauma. And so, yeah, to me, it's just fascinating how God takes the disasters that happened in the world and redeems them. And he literally brought every one of those people groups that right now, we can't go into South Sudan and travel, even today. But yet I can drive between 1 and 2 hours from my house, and I can have contact with every one of those people groups, sharing the gospel and meeting needs. And we've seen lots of people come to Christ. We've seen churches pop up all over. To return back to Salah, the areas of Sudan that we saw really a lot of movement of the Holy Spirit were people who were from Darfur, people who were from the mountains. And it just seemed that whenever they came to Christ, there was just this passion and this fire in them, because what they would share was like, I have been deceived my whole life. And it disturbed them. They lost sleep because they are concerned about their mothers and their fathers and their brothers and sisters who are still back in Sudan, who need yet to hear the gospel. And so many of them started coming to me and saying, hey, we're praying about going back home. We need help. Can you train us? Can you prepare us? And so we began that process, I guess, about a year ago. And that continues even now. Salah came to me. This is probably in January, maybe December or January. I don't know if you guys pay any attention, but Sudan had some major changes, and there was basically a revolution that happened in Khartoum. And all of the military presence that had been in these two areas of Darfur and Nuba Mountains to basically control these tribes was called up to come and help in the capital. And whenever that happened, and all of that kind of military presence dispersed, the gospel just broke loose. And Salah came to me in January of this year, and he said, Jay, I have to go back to Nuba Mountains. And, you know, he is a dear friend of mine. And I'm like, well, okay, like, why we got to go right now? You know, what's going on? And he said, I got word from my hometown on the telephone this week that 752 people came to Christ in my home village this week. He said, Jay, I can't sit here surrounded by Christians in a refugee camp whenever people in my home village are coming to Christ. He said, I have to be a part of this. And so he did. He went back. I haven't heard from him for a couple of months. The first few months, he stayed in fairly good contact, but I think that communication has been difficult since then. But I'm in contact with about 15 guys who are all planning on going back to Darfur and Nuba Mountain specifically, not because they specifically just want to go home, but because they want to go home to share the gospel with people who haven't heard. And I know Salah and another friend of mine whose name is Nasser, who have both returned and are very excited about what God's doing there. So I see this as I explain it to others, like what our situation is right now we have a very small window in which to invest into these future missionaries that are going to go places that we are not able to go. They will be returning. And there's no question, there are people I know right now that are packed, that have their bags packed, they're ready to go. But like we have a few years maybe to prepare them, to disciple them, to mentor them, to get them both physically and emotionally prepared to return home. Many of them have undergone severe trauma. And so we're providing for them trauma healing, helping them to find purpose in the suffering and the hardship that they have gone through. Some of them have absolutely no biblical training. And so we're providing theological education for them there in the camps. We had a group come out early this year. I'm going to say it was January that they came. And we have bought a bunch of study Bibles. And we're training pastors how to use a study Bible. And that sounds so elementary to people from America. But most of these pastors, they have had zero training. They don't have any commentaries. They don't have any access to anything. And I know several pastors who don't even own a Bible. And so how exactly are they supposed to lead a church? And so we've been donated a bunch of these study Bibles. And so we'll go in and we'll do a one-day training on how to use a study Bible. And in the morning, we'll train them how to utilize cross-references and all the notes and those types of things. But in the afternoon of the training, we teach them how to prepare a teaching or a sermon. And it's a one-day thing, but it has absolutely revolutionized everything, because many of the churches that we have, they've gone from basically a pastor getting up there and kicking the dirt with his hands in his pockets, trying to come up with something to say, to actually understanding and being able to share a good gospel message with his congregation on Sundays. And so they're able to grow, and we're empowering the nationals to do the work rather than us stepping in and doing it for them, because they're obviously more capable in so many different ways. Just a couple of things that I've learned through the process. I think that having been a church planter in remote places for most of my career, I had the privilege of basically going in and just doing that, planting churches. We would meet some small needs here and there, but it wasn't a big push of what we did in the early part of our career as missionaries. But in moving into this role, one of the things that I have, I guess, recognized, I was a little bit late to this game, but as you read in the Gospels, it seems like Jesus always has something in each hand. In one hand, he brings help, whether it's food for the hungry, whether it's healing for the sick. He brings some kind of physical, practical help, and then he follows that up with spiritual nourishment. And as I started reading through the Gospels, again, moving into this task, I was like, how have I not seen this all along, that Jesus carried both of those things all the time? And it seems that most of my career I have just carried, gospel truth and teachings, but I have failed to really put a whole lot of focus on the humanitarian needs of the people that we've been working with. And so we've just basically developed our strategy around that. We're going to bring physical help, and we're also going to bring spiritual help. And it's transformed everything that we've done, because it's given us access to people that we would have never had access to. And they listen to us because first we fill their bellies, and we build homes for them, and we provide water for them. And doing all those things help us to be able to share the gospel in a way that actually goes beyond just the words, because they've felt the love that we have for them and the Christian charity that we have shared with them. So yeah, I guess that's a nutshell. I know that have I gone over yet? No, I'm still within time, right?
You're right at it. All right, Jeremy, we really appreciate it. So we're going to have a couple people share some shorter stories. These are folks who are working here in Houston. The first of these is going to be by video. If you can't hear, make some kind of sound so I know to turn it off, and we'll move on with something else. But yeah, here we go. This is the first one. These are the Keenies.
Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Randy Keeney, and this is my wife, Brooke. We have 4 kids as well, ages 10 through 5. We just want to thank Brian for the opportunity to share with y'all a little bit about how our family's been able to get connected with and serve and love families in our area that have come from Iraq and Afghanistan and other war-torn areas, families who've endured much suffering and been, we believe, sovereignly selected by God to come to this nation, ultimately for an opportunity to hear the gospel and to believe in Jesus, and to go and take that message of salvation back to friends and families back home in some of the hardest to reach nations on earth. So we just view it as a great strategic opportunity, a way to disciple our kids and to help them understand God's heart for the nations, that he desires to be loved and worshiped by people from every tongue, tribe, and nation, to faithfully be praying for these families and just calling out to God for him to bring salvation to their household. So it's just been a wonderful blessing to our family, and a lot of great friendships have been made as we've just been faithfully going about in this ministry for the last couple of years. So with that, I'm going to let Brooke share a little bit more about some of those families.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a few personal stories just about some families that we've been able to connect with over the last couple of years and to befriend. And just wanted to encourage everyone that this is something you can do. This is something you can do with your kid. Our youngest son is 5 years old, and when he was, I think, 2.5 or 3, he was coming along with us, and he was playing games and tag and hide and seek and running around with the other kids. And it didn't matter if they spoke Dari and he spoke English or Arabic, or they were able to just play and to connect and to have fun. And it was just such a blessing to us just to see the families with their faces lit up. You think about them coming here, they don't have anything. They usually come sometimes with just a plastic bag or even nothing if they've been living in a refugee camp. And they're starting a completely new life here with a different culture and a different way of doing things. And a lot of times they don't meet any American families for a really long time. And so it's just been really neat to be able to just go through life with some of these families, just like we do with our church families, and just to introduce them to, this is how the school system works, here's how the grocery store is, this is how you get a driver's license, and just see them discovering new things as they acclimate to American culture. And then just as they see us with our family and they come over to our homes and they see scripture on the wall and they know that we go to church, and we've invited them to Christmas Eve services. We've given Bibles in their language. And as we've developed friendships with them and they trust us and we have a relationship with them, it's really opened up an opportunity to really share with them the truth of the gospel. And almost, I think I've been in a lot of foreign countries, and I almost feel like it's easier here when they come here to our country, because they're really actually wanting American friends. They don't think we're suspicious, and they don't think we have some other ulterior agenda, but they really want to know, what do you believe and what makes you do this? And I remember getting a text from one of our Afghan friends, and she said, I don't understand why your family is so kind to us. It was like she set us up to share the gospel with them. And it's just really, it's a humbling privilege to be able to meet people from countries where there's no church, there's no gospel. Maybe they've never met another Christian. And I told my kids that, I'm like, you may be the first Christian kid that they've ever met. And there's a great weighty responsibility with that, but also a joy that God allows us to be a part of his kingdom work and sharing his good news of Jesus to these people that may have never heard it if they had stayed in their home country. And so we're just, thankful for the opportunity to do that, thankful to do that with our kids. And, we do honestly get pushback from the kids because they would, and myself too, because honestly, I don't always want to give up 2 hours on a Saturday or give my free time maybe when my kids are at school to go take someone to lunch or to just listen to them and have a cup of tea. Sometimes it is easier to just write a check or to fill a box with food. But when you invest in the relationship and the friendship, it just makes such a difference, and it forges the ties with the families, especially coming from cultures where relationships in family and community is so important, and maybe something we're lacking here in the States a little bit. And so we've actually learned so much about hospitality and friendship from a lot of our refugee family friends. I remember the one Afghan family, and he said, all right, my home is your home. My home is your home. You are always welcome here, always welcome here. And I had to think to myself, could I say that back? Is someone always welcome in my home, or are there times that are inconvenient? And I think he honestly meant anytime, day or night, if we needed something, their home and what they had, even though it was so small, was available to us. And I just have seen so many opportunities to just share God's love, and seeing that opportunity to share the gospel with the different families as we've built these relationships. So we have so many other stories we could share with you, and just different experiences, and just there's facts and statistics and all these things about refugees that I know you'll learn today as well. But if you remember that behind every one of those facts and statistics is a soul, and is a person and a family that's been made in the image of God. And we have the opportunity to introduce them to the best news they could possibly hear, which is better news than getting resettled in America. There's better news than getting out of a war-torn country. Their best news and the best hope they have in their true refuge is in Jesus. And anyways, that's what our family, we feel, has been called to do during this season. And we're very grateful for the opportunity. We would love to answer any other questions that anyone has. Text us, email us, come over for dinner, let's grab a cup of coffee, hop along with us to come and visit some of these families. And we know that you'll be blessed as you see God at work among the refugees in Houston.
Thank y'all. God bless you.
All right, our next story is going to come from Melody.
Okay, and I'll be pretty quick. It's a little challenging when Brian first asked me this, because I was like, well, I've worked with Houston Welcomes Refugees and I've been on welcome teams and I've done that, but mine haven't necessarily been the success stories as far as really building the solid relationships like the Keenies were just talking about. And but it has been really humbling. So I was on a welcome team most recently with a family from Afghanistan. It was a mom and her teenage son who came, and so just now we weren't able to have the whole time our full commitment with that family because of COVID and just some other struggles with getting in touch with them. But it was really humbling to hear their stories and to know that the mom, especially, she put her life at risk every single day trying to get the opportunity to come here. And so, she was able to come here, but then it was heartbreaking because they had to leave part of their family behind, and they didn't really want to be here, but we're here because it wasn't safe for them where they are. And then they come here and this is, I think there are just a lot of attitudes in this country where, they're not necessarily welcomed, you know, and so just realizing that, like, I get to have a small role in showing them that they're loved and showing them that they are welcomed here, they are wanted here, has just been really humbling and really exciting for me. And, you know, while I wish that things had turned out differently with this family and, you know, that we'd had more of that connection, you know, I am grateful for the little bit of time I was able to spend with them, and yeah, just to learn more about their stories, and just recognizing that, like, the things that they put themselves through just to come here. And I wanted to read something. I recently read a book called it's called Beautiful Resistance, written by John Tyson. And, you know, and I think over the last several years, God has been moving in my heart and showing me more of his heart for the marginalized, and putting that heart in me and giving me greater empathy. And so there's something I read recently that I wanted to share, as far as, you know, when it comes to what is God's heart for the outsider. It says, the reason God calls us to, so he's talking about hospitality and the importance of showing hospitality to the foreigner, and love for the other. And he says, the reason God calls us to this kind of love is that this is the way he has loved us. We often forget what our lives were like before God saved us. We project ourselves into the story of salvation in distorted ways, misreading scripture as though we were the insider group. We read as if Jesus came to reaffirm our belonging and acceptance, but nothing could be further from the truth. Paul described our condition before Christ as outsiders. In Ephesians 2, he wrote, remember that formerly you who are Gentiles by birth and called uncircumcised were separate from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel and foreigners to the covenants of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. Separate, excluded, foreigners, hopeless. In the story of redemption, we are the strangers. We are the outsiders. We are the other. And so I think that just, you know, that was very challenging and very humbling for me, because, yeah, I think, you know, as the American church particularly, we do tend to put our place in, you know, we assume like we are the chosen people, and we're not. We were outsiders too. And God welcomed us in through Jesus. And so, yeah, those are the things he's been teaching me about the way I should love the outsider and love the foreigner, because that's what I was and what I would be without Christ. So
Thank you. That was great. Challenging words. Okay, and now we have our guest on this side of the pond. We've already dealt with the opposites, the other side, and so we have Houston Welcomes Refugees that's going to share with us about refugee work here.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be on this call with you. My name is Cindy Wu, and I am the program manager for Houston Welcomes Refugees. I'm going to have a couple of us who are with the Houston Welcomes team introduce themselves real quick. I'm going to start off with Molly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Molly Rainey, and I am the Executive Director of Houston Welcomes Refugees.
And also we have a board member, John. Could you just say hi?
Yes, hello, everyone. I'm John Sullivan, and pleased to be a board member for Houston Welcomes Refugees.
And then someone on this call, Becca Gilmore, she is our administrative coordinator. So I just want to encourage those of you who have maybe turned off your video, if you are presentable, would you please turn your video on, as our orientation is interactive. So I'm going to turn it over to Molly, who will introduce you to our mission.
Wonderful. All right, everyone. So the mission of Houston Welcomes Refugees is really to help ease that initial burden of resettlement for refugees. And we do that by mobilizing volunteers, really from churches all over Houston. As Jeremy and some others alluded to, you know, we are living in a time and really in a place, in a city where the Lord is this conflict is happening, and the Lord is bringing so many people into our neighborhoods, into our city, who are either fleeing religious persecution or maybe haven't even met someone who's a follower of Christ. We work with people who know Christ and people who don't, and how unique that God has each one of us living here in Houston in this time, and it's a weighty responsibility, but a really neat opportunity for us to get to respond to that and to serve. And so that's really why Houston Welcomes Refugees is here. We were founded back in 2016. We are a 501c3 nonprofit working to mobilize the church. We are not affiliated with any single church. Rather, our leadership and our volunteers represent a number of different churches around Houston, which is really fun. It's really fun to see the body of Christ across such a large city coming together for this one purpose. We are not a resettlement agency either. Rather, we partner with a local resettlement agency, and that's how we receive our refugees. And then we play this unique role of connecting you, the volunteer from the church, with a newly arrived refugee family. We all believe as leaders that our call is to respond to the needs of the foreigners in our city with the overflow of love that we receive from Christ. And so since we got started, we've been able to mobilize over 1,900 volunteers from over 115 different churches across Houston. And that's allowed us to serve over 850 refugees that represent 16 different nationalities around the world. So praise God for that. This is His work, His project, and we're just doing our best to be humble and faithful servants of that. So we're going to start off and share with you guys some facts and figures about the refugee crisis. Cindy is going to lead us through some really frequently asked questions. Hopefully you guys will learn something new.
Okay, so for this portion, just follow along, but remember that there is a grid on the last page of the packet, and you're going to be referring to that in about 5 minutes. So go ahead and prepare that if you have it available. Otherwise, you can just use a sheet of paper. And if you want to jot down some notes as we go along right now on that sheet of paper, you can do that as well. So my first question is, what is the difference between a refugee and an immigrant? This is a question that we get a lot. And when you think about the word immigrant, it's usually someone who willfully traveled to another country, whereas a refugee is someone who is forced to flee home because of war, persecution, or violence. The United Nations has a technical definition for refugee. They are a person who has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Technically, refugees are a subset of immigrant, but colloquially, we distinguish them by whether or not they had a choice to move. The second question we often get asked is, how many refugees are there in the world right now? So I want you to either write down or put a number in your head. Okay, how many refugees are there in the world? Well, it's important to get a grasp on how many forcibly displaced persons there are globally so that we get an understanding of the scope of the issue. A displaced person is anyone who was forced from their home. Okay, so as of today, an unprecedented 79.5 million people around the world have been forced from their home. And among them are over 26 million refugees. The vast majority of forcibly displaced persons are internally displaced, meaning they are still within the borders of their home country. But 26 million are outside of the borders of their home country. That's roughly the entire population of the state of Texas. And once you are outside of the borders of your home country, you're more vulnerable because you lose any of the rights of citizenship that you had when you were in your home country. So out of that 26 million, guess how many are children? Now I want you to put a percentage in your head. Over half of all refugees are under the age of 18. Many of these kids don't get to go to school, and when they come to the States, they have to work really hard to learn English to catch up with their education. What percentage of refugees are eventually resettled into a new country they can officially call home? Okay, so like we said, there's 26 million refugees in the world today, and despite the need, less than 1% of all refugees around the world in any given year are ever resettled. Resettlement is the careful selection by governments like the United States of the most vulnerable refugees who can neither return to their home country nor safely live in their current host country. Resettlement is a legal process that provides a life-saving alternative for refugees. As Jimmy mentioned earlier, most refugees actually want to go home. And the other option, but that's kind of a difficult option if they live in a place that has a lot of conflict. And some refugees just flee somewhere and they try to make a life there. But a very small percentage will be resettled into a third country. And one category of refugee that we want you guys to know about are people who come on a special immigrant visa. These are primarily Afghans and Iraqis who have aided the US military in some form. Their lives were threatened by their assistance to our government. And so when they come here, they are often supported by the veteran community. Another question that we get asked a lot is, what's the difference between a refugee versus an asylum seeker? A lot of people think these are the same thing. A refugee, before they come to the States, they are actually processed in their host country, and they must be recognized by the United Nations program. These people are processed over there and legally accepted to come to the United States before they even set foot on a plane. Asylum seekers are people who are also known as asylees. They are processed at or within the border of the country they are fleeing to. So in our context, when you think of a lot of the migrants coming from Central and South America, many of those are asylum seekers. So I just want to share that so that we know the difference. Okay, how can we be confident that refugees are safe, meaning not a threat, to come to America? Well, refugees go through a very stringent vetting process that includes 8 government agencies like the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security. They go through multiple background checks, multiple in-person interviews, and then health screenings to prevent contagious diseases from entering the US. And this is all part of a recurring process, which is conducted in host countries before refugees ever come. On average, it takes 18 months to 2 years to complete this process. And we often see this taking longer due to increased security measures. So just know that refugees are the most vetted immigrant group, and the absolute hardest way to get into the United States is as a refugee. You might be wondering, what state in the US resettled the most refugees over the past year? Okay, I'm going to give you a hint. It's the best state. You're right, it is Texas. We resettled 3,646 refugees in last fiscal year, with Houston taking in about 1/3 of that number. Other states that received the most refugees were California, New York, and Washington State. Here's a question for you. What factors are important in deciding where refugees are placed? So when the United States decides, where should a refugee live, they're going to think about the different resources and the type of environment that is good, not only for refugees, but also for the welcoming city. So Houston happens to be one of the top resettlement cities in the entire country. We are very diverse. We have a welcoming environment. We have an affordable cost of living, a world-class medical center for many of the refugees that have medical issues, and a strong economy so that refugees can find jobs. Oftentimes, refugees will go to diverse cities like Houston or Los Angeles, but some cities that don't have a lot of diversity will also welcome refugees in order to diversify. An interesting fact, 5 years ago, if Harris County had been a country, we would have ranked 5th in the world for refugee resettlement. The last question is, what are the top nationalities of refugees coming to Houston in recent years? So we receive many that are Congolese, many Afghans and Iraqis who come in on those special immigrant visas that we mentioned, Burmese. Many of them historically have been part of minority Christian groups, although in more recent years we're receiving Rohingya who are Muslim. We have refugees from Eritrea, which is an Eastern African nation. And then I put the map of Syria there because 1/4 of all refugees today is Syrian, but we actually don't receive a ton of Syrians as you might think. And that's because of concerns over ISIS have put in place additional vetting procedures. Houston Welcomes Refugees has also welcomed people from Bhutan, Colombia, Iran, El Salvador, the Sudan, and refugees that we've met come from all over the world, all walks of life, education levels, religious backgrounds, and levels of crises. And it's super important to remember that refugees are not all the same. In your packet, there is a link to this this sheet. It's a fact sheet created by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and it has additional information about refugees that we would love for you guys to take a look at. It's really important to us as an organization that our volunteers are not only kind and compassionate people, but that they're also educated about refugees, because there are so many myths and misconceptions around the crisis. So just wave your hand at me if you learned one new thing from this diagnostic quiz. Okay, awesome. I'm going to turn it over now to Molly, who's going to take us through an activity.
Wonderful. Okay, this is an interactive portion of our virtual mission trip today. You're going to be using that grid that was included in the packet, or that you've hopefully drawn on a piece of paper. It's going to be 16 squares, and I want you to make sure that it's numbered 1 through 16, so that every box in your grid has a number assigned to it. Once you get your grid with the numbers, if you could just give me a little thumbs up. I'll give you guys about a minute to get that ready. All right, Joan's got hers. Holly's got hers. All right. All right. So you've got your grid with 16 squares. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you instructions on what to write in each one of these boxes. You're just going to be writing one thing in each box. Boxes 1 through 4, I want you to write down the names of 4 people that you love. Just think of 4 people that come to the front of your mind that you love, and I want you to write their names in each box. Do 1 name per box. I'm going to do this with you. Four people that you love. Okay. For the next 4 boxes, boxes 5 through 8, I want you to write down 4 activities that you enjoy doing. 4 activities that you enjoy. So maybe reading or walking, dinner with friends, back in the good old days before Corona. Four activities. Okay, so you've got 4 people that you love, 4 activities that you enjoy. Now I want you to write down 4 possessions that you value. 4 material possessions, material things that you have that are of great value to you. So maybe a family heirloom, or a special book, or maybe your smartphone, if we're all being honest with ourselves. 4 possessions that you value. Okay, in the last 4 boxes, I want you to write down 4 titles that you hold. Titles that you hold. So maybe it's mother or brother, teacher, engineer, friend. 4 titles that you hold. All right, so you've got 4 people that you love, 4 possessions that you value, 4 activities that you enjoy, not in that order, and then 4 titles that you hold. So if you guys could just real quick wave your grid up on the screen so I can see if you're finished. All right. Okay, so I'd like you to take your pen that you have in hand, and I want you to pick two of the items on your grid, any two items, and I want you to draw a heart in that box. So pick two items, two boxes, and draw a heart around the item in that box. Any two items. I want you just to take a moment to look at those items and just reflect on maybe how grateful you are that God has given you those. Maybe it's a person that you love or an activity that you really enjoy doing. Something special that God has given you to enjoy. Now I'd like you to take that same pen in those boxes where you drew your heart, and I want you to draw a large X across those boxes. A large X. It's going to look something like that. These represent, in this scenario, items that are no longer a part of your life. Okay? So you've got two boxes with big X's in them. Let's see. Barbara, could you do me a favor and just hold up a number between 1 and 10 on the screen? Is that 6? Okay, I want everybody to cross out box number 6. So go ahead and cross out box number 6. If you already had box number 6 crossed out, lucky you, you don't lose anything extra. Box number 6. Okay, I want all of the men to cross out box number 12. So if you're a man, cross out box number 12. And if you are a woman, please cross out box number 13. Box number 13. Okay. Everyone with brown hair, I want you to cross out box number 3. Number 3. And everyone who was born in the United States, if you were born here in the United States, I want you to cross out box number 9. Okay. Miss Joan, I would like you to cross out box number 4. And let's see. John, I would like you to cross out box number 10, if it's not already crossed out. All right. So you've got a grid that has a bunch of X's across it, right? Probably X's through the names of people that you love, things that you value greatly. Take just a moment, look down at your box and see what you're left with. See what you've lost, see what you're left with, and just take a moment to reflect on what it might actually be like to lose these things in real life. I'd love to hear some of the emotions that maybe you have as you're reflecting on this. If you'd like to unmute yourself or just type in the chat box, what are some of the feelings that you have as you're looking down at your grid right now? At what you've lost and what you have left.
Do you want what we've got left?
How do you feel about what you have left? How are you feeling looking down at what you have?
I don't know whether I understood the question down at the last group of squares, but I've got peace down.
You have what?
Peace.
Peace? That you have some items left, some things that are not crossed out. That's a very positive way to look at it. Okay, I like that.
I'll be the opposite. I'll say a sense of loss. You know, like with the family and kids and a lot of like the important, like I started with important to less important of my favorites of all of these. And so I'm left basically with camping, which is good because apparently I'm a refugee, so and I still have my camping gear, but I don't have any kids or wife to camp with.
Yeah.
I feel sadness.
Yeah.
She lost me, so.
My husband's not there anymore. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Marilyn said she crossed out her mom. It breaks her heart to think about losing her family. Barbara lost 2 sons and the title of mother, which would be devastating to lose that. Yeah, these are all just, I think, very normal emotions to feel if you think about this scenario and it potentially being real. And just think about it for a moment. You know, this is an imaginary exercise. It's a piece of paper. You know, more than likely you can pick up that phone and call one of the people that you have on your list. But the reality is that for so many of the families that we've served, they've lost things. They've lost people that they care about. They've certainly lost their homes. They lose pieces of what can feel like their identity. And it wasn't a choice for them. It was taken from them. For some of them, it was taken very quickly. There's a couple stories that we like to share. One of families that we've met and worked with. One was an Iraqi family of 5 that resettled here in Houston. The father of the family had been an engineer. The mother had been a scientist back in Iraq. And as Orthodox Christians, they had fled religious persecution there. Upon resettlement here in Houston, the father took a job in a bakery at Walmart, and the mom was working in childcare at a local church. Both of them so grateful to have jobs that they could do here. But if you think about how much dignity there is in work and being able to do the work that you feel like God called and designed you to do, whether that's in the home or out of the home, and to have lost that, it feels for them like they've lost a part of their identity. There was another family that we've met. It was a Syrian family, and they had 4 kids. They were at home in their village in Syria when they received word that ISIS was about to show up in their village. Their 2 older kids were at elementary school, and they were at home with their 2 youngest kids, and they had to make an instantaneous decision. Do we stay here at home, wait for our older children to come home from school, risk our lives and the lives of our babies, or do we flee with our younger kids and just pray that someone will take our older ones? And the decision that they made was to flee. And that was the reality for them, the reality that they might not see those 2 older kids. And these stories are not sensationalized. They're real stories from real people. And we go through this exercise and we share some of these stories because it really can be easy to get lost in the media and in the reporting of numbers and in the misrepresentation of facts. And we can start to think of people really just as numbers, as these distant people who are so far from us, but they're just people like us, made in the image of God, and they've lost people and things that they care about. And we have this beautiful opportunity just to come alongside them in a time of great transition, and to love them and to show them that they're cared for in a new place and in a challenging time. So at this time, you can go ahead and put your grid away. You can throw it away if that'll make you feel better. We're going to transition, and Cindy's going to share about just specifically what Houston Welcomes Refugees volunteers do to help ease the burden of resettlement for our families.
Thanks, Molly. So there's a video that we like to share. I'm not going to share it today in the interest of time, but this is linked into the packet, and I highly encourage you to watch it. It just tells a bit of the impact of Houston Welcomes on 2 of our refugee families. But today I do want to talk about our different programs. First, we do partner with a local agency. It's the YMCA International Services, which is part of the Greater Y of the Houston area. A lot of people think of the Y as just gym and swim, but they also do immigration services. And so this is how we learn about refugees coming to Houston. We have 3 main programs: Welcome Kits, Move-In Teams, and Welcome Teams. After today's orientation, you'll be equipped to do Welcome Kits or Move-In Teams. If you want to serve on a Welcome Team, there's additional training, which I'll explain. So Welcome Kits are essentials that every refugee family needs to start life over in America. We all know how expensive it is to furnish a home, and so these Welcome Kits are a blessing to the families, but also empower them to spend their federal welcome money on other things besides sponges and trash bags. So Welcome Kits can be put together by your church, your small group, your family. We have regular collection dates at our office in the Heights, and we provide information for you, what goes into the kits, as well as a toolkit if you want to organize a drive for your own group. Move-in teams show up on the day of an arrival and they go to the apartment. They take the kids from our office and drive them to the apartment. One person will go grocery shopping. One person will pick up a hot meal from Afghan Village, really awesome Afghan food. And believe it or not, it takes less than an hour to set up an entire apartment. You turn an empty place into a home. And it's so fun because you just imagine when you're praying at the very end that the next people who step foot into this apartment are travel-weary refugees who aren't expecting anything, and they walk into an apartment that has the beds made and the curtains hung up for them. Each of the welcome team volunteers has a specific role, which will be communicated to you when you sign up. So we're going to give you a chance at the end of the orientation to indicate your area of interest. And if you select move-in teams, you'll be added to an email list. And then whenever we have a move-in, you can sign up for one of these roles. We do ask that if you serve on a move-in team that you will dress modestly because we work in immigrant communities. Just be mindful that many of our families are Muslim, their neighbors are Muslim, and so we just want to honor their culture. We do most of our move-ins in the middle of the day to accommodate work schedules. So if you want to take an hour off of your lunch break to go help out with a move-in, you can do that. And most of our refugee families live in Southwest Houston. Finally, we have welcome teams, and this is really the heartbeat of Houston Welcomes Refugees. Welcome teams support and love refugee families. You don't take over the job of the caseworker. You don't have to find refugees a job. You don't have to apply for Social Security for them, but you can greet them at the airport, bake with them, have picnics with them, and take them to cultural events. Many of our families come not expecting to have any friends, not expecting to meet Americans right away. And so they're often very surprised and very grateful when they have an American friend who can serve as a support and a cultural broker for them. If you want to serve on a welcome team, there is an additional training. So when you indicate your interest at the end of the orientation, you'll receive a follow-up email which will have a link to an application. Then you'll complete a 15-minute phone interview with me and then attend an online welcome team training. Our next one is going to be on October 27th. So if the idea of befriending refugees appeals to you, please note that date, October 27th. Due to COVID, right now arrivals are kind of slow, but we would love to get you trained up and ready to go when refugees do start to come. We do ask that move-in and welcome team volunteers do the YMCA's required background check and online child abuse training. This is required by the Y. And so this is our website. Again, this is posted in the welcome packet. And so I really want to encourage you guys to check out our website if you want some more information about Houston Welcomes Refugees. And I'm going to go ahead and post right now in the chat area a link where you can fill out your response in the areas that you're interested in. And that link is also included in the packet, of course. So that concludes our orientation. I'm going to turn it back over to Brian and we're going to go into a time of prayer. But if you have any questions from the orientation, like facts about refugees or questions about our programs, Molly and I will be hanging on after the entire program is over to answer any lingering questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so before we go to breakout rooms, I just want to say a big thank you to Jeremy and to Molly and Cindy for taking time to share all of this information with us. And I appreciate all of you joining our call and being part. We are going to have a little short time of prayer. These prayer requests, I'm going to go ahead and post them here into the chat, but these prayer requests were also in the handout. So if you've clicked that link or opened it up, they should be there. We've updated a couple for our Uganda team there. But anyway, we'll take 10 minutes. So you'll see a countdown timer, and it will automatically dump you back in the main room when we're done. And if you have any questions or want to hang out and chat with either Jeremy or the HWR team, you're welcome to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in. Don't linger in prayer. I know that sounds weird, but if you're long-winded, maybe limit yourself to one of the requests just so other people get a chance to pray as well. All right. Well, now we have time. We have a few minutes for. Well, I guess actually we're right at 11:30. But if you want to hang out for a few minutes, you can ask Jeremy questions or Cindy and Molly questions about ministry here in Houston. So just unmute and fire away, or you can wave goodbye. Either way.
So this is Tom. I just had a quick question. I had heard recently that the number of refugees that were being allowed to come into the United States went from 18,000 to 15,000. And is that like a done deal, or what's the scoop on that? And does that affect the number of refugees that are going to be coming to Houston next year?
I can take that. I think the last article that we saw on it, it was the proposal that came from the president. So he'll work in conjunction with Congress to make the final decision. So we're still, Cindy, not shake your head if I'm saying this wrong, but I haven't seen that the final number will be 15,000. So we're still hopeful that that maybe it could bounce back up. We'll have to see. As far as affecting Houston, you know, we tend to be pretty confident in the numbers that come to Houston because we found that a lot of the families that are coming are actually being reunited with family members that have already resettled. And because Houston has been a leader for so long, we've got a lot of families here who are waiting on family members to come. We also have 5 local agencies and all those things that Cindy went through that make us just a really great resettlement city. So we still expect that no matter what the numbers are for Houston to continue to be a leader for the nation. Great question.
Any other questions? So you're muted. You're still muted. I'll try to lip read if you talk really big.
So Brian,
Can you unmute her? Sorry. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Brian, I got a question for Jeremy. So the story, and I'm sorry, I forget the name of the butcher in the refugee. Is it Jeremy? Do you remember, or can you remind me?
Yeah, his name's Salam.
Salam, yeah. So Salam, you know, got news at his village there were, you know, a huge number of Christian converts. So what was the cause of the great conversion in his village?
So previous to that, the military basically enforced a no conversion law that Sudan has. Hey, Daniel, don't do that. They enforced that, and so if there was any kind of sharing of the gospel, you could be put in jail or killed, stoned. And whenever the military moved to Khartoum to basically try to get things back in order there, all those rules, both in Darfur as well as there were some Christians that were kind of underground that began to speak up, just kind of testing the waters. And the Lord had just prepared the hearts of people, and they just started coming to faith en masse. And it's still going on right now in both places, in Darfur and in Nuba Mountains.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome how God does what he does, how he uses conflict to grow the kingdom of God.
Yes. It reminds me of the Isaiah verse, I think it's 55 or 58, that says, you know, as the rain comes down and nourishes the crops, so my word will, you know, will not return without, you know, I'm butchering this obviously, but without incredible produce.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in the process right now. I've got 2,000 Arabic New Testaments that are sitting in a storeroom at my office that I'm trying to get up there, because our thoughts is that with these people coming to Christ, they have no background in the Christian faith. If we could just get them the scriptures, it'll be like throwing gasoline on the fire, you know, that's already burning. So
And I'm sorry, I missed the first part again. I'm sorry. What's the name of your organization?
I'm with the International Mission Board, the Southern Baptist Missions Agency, but we also have an NGO here called Borderlands that kind of we do most of our humanitarian aid through it, so as not to bring undue attention to the organization.
And as far as Bibles, getting Bibles to where they're needed most, is there a way to do that?
Yeah, we're actually working. We're partnering right now with. We're working on a partnership with 4 other organizations: Samaritan's Purse, African Inland Mission, and then what's the other one? Was it YWAM? And so basically, all of us trying to figure out how can we help each other. Daniel, stop it. How can we all kind of pitch in with what we're good at? To be able to get these Bibles up there. And we're going to be doing some training of some national brothers up just right on the border between South Sudan and Sudan.
That's cool.
Well, I have a question for HWR. If you were to, I mean, I know you probably have tons of needs, but what would you say are like your top 1 or 2 needs right now during COVID?
You want me to go? I mean, when we look at how we want to grow as an organization, really welcome team volunteers. And that's even now during COVID, before COVID, and probably after COVID. So we're partnered with one of the 5 local agencies here. Through that partnership last year, we were able to serve 30% of the total number of refugees that came to Houston. So we still have a lot of room to grow, and that's really just contingent upon getting enough volunteers for every family that's coming. We saw about 1,000 refugees that came to Houston last year. And so expecting that Houston will still continue to be a leader even into the future as long as refugees are coming, then that's going to continue to be our greatest need. And so with that, even word of mouth. So if you've got friends either at Wilcrest or friends in other circles that you think might be interested in this work, just connecting them with us would just be wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll just add that during the time of COVID, some people who want to serve on a welcome team might feel hesitant to do so because of COVID. And so welcome kids would also be something that people can do that's socially distanced.
Yeah. With my position at HBU, I'm helping them design intercultural studies program, missions program. And I'm trying to incorporate some required kind of mission outreach activity hours as part of their thing. Because I am connected to a lot of people like HWR and Prestige and some other groups like that in town that probably use some fresh blood.
Yeah, that'd be really neat. We were actually supposed to do, I think, was it an orientation, Cindy, at HBU this spring? It was going to be our first one, and then COVID happened. So it'd be nice to still have a connection there.
We were supposed to do an orientation and a move-in with the BSM.
Oh, nice. Oh, that was going to the BSM. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. All right. Any other pressing questions? All right. Well, I want to just thank everybody for coming, and I want to encourage you to look through the packet. There's some extra resources and some links and such that go to the various ministries. There's a couple free PDFs in there that are informational, and there's some recommended books in the resource setting. I would highly recommend the recipe section. If you've never had Afghan food, it is quite delicious. Or go to Afghan Village. It's a favorite of mine and has been for a long time. People always ask me, because I had a food blog on international food in Houston for a while. They always say, well, what's your favorite food? And I said, well, it's a region, and it starts in Western China and just goes across all the way through Afghanistan. Everything on that road right there, that's where I could just retire. Mm-hmm. So anyway, thank you very much for coming on the call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for putting it all
Thank you all.
together.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeremy.
God bless you.
Thanks for coming, Jeremy.
God bless.
Thanks, everybody. Say bye.
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 Bye, Daniel.
Bye.
Bye.